It's almost 6 p.m. and I'm trying to find the strength to get dressed. Fall has come and it gets dark so much earlier. It's like it happens so quickly. And I'm feeling the squeeze and I feel like it doesn't give me anxiety. It's you know, it I'm feeling defeated. I'm so sick and weak, and by the time I get dressed, like it is 5:54 p.m. By the time I get dressed, the sun is going to be down and it's not going to be dark yet, but I just feel defeated. And my day is going to start like at 6:30 p.m. and I'll go for a little walk and that's it. That's what my life that's what's left of my life. I wanted to talk about this thing because I just saw somebody make this video about that their life ended in 2018 when they were their job ended and they quit work in 2018 when they were diagnosed with my something. I was told I have this too, encephalitis, the ME, chronic fatigue syndrome / ME. I've been legitimately diagnosed with all sorts of different things, but I wanted to make note of this, that I'm not sure what year this started, if it started in 2017 or 2018. And my face my head became so swollen. Like, I don't know if this started with the benzo withdrawal injury or if it started before that. And I just wanted to make note of a couple of weird things because I want them here documented. I want these videos to document my journey, and these things haven't been diagnosed or figured out, or like I have a KRE malformation, I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, severe sleep apnea, which is starting to not be severe, ME, chronic fatigue syndrome, Epstein-Barr virus, neuropathy, peripheral neuropathy. I believe I have motor neuropathy. I had POTS for 4.5 years. That went away. I got POTS from the benzo injury for 4.5 years. If I stood up, my heart rate went, more than 30 beats per minute. All sorts of weird things that were never diagnosed. My thighs turning purple, my feet turning blue every time I ate. That went on for years. That has finally stopped. I used to have to walk every time I ate because my feet would turn blue. It's like my circulation would stop. It's like every time I ate, eating took too much work for my body. I don't know. I don't understand any of that. My thighs turning purple and my feet turning blue. There's a lot I don't understand. But I want to talk about these couple things that I have never figured out. I have figured out so many things. I have solved so many things. I have figured out so many things. But there are things that I haven't figured out. And I know I've talked far too much about this, and I'm sick of this as well. But I wanted to I want this video as a document about this one particular thing about my head being swollen. But this what I'm going to say next happened in the same time frame. So I was sleeping 3 hours a night for years, and then I lost my hearing. I lost most of my hearing for 2 years. And in that 2 years, I went from sleeping 3 hours a night for years, literally, really fighting to survive, fighting not to leave this earth. And so during that 2 years that I lost my hearing, I began sleeping around the clock. I began sleeping for a year. I began sleeping 18 hours a day for almost a year. And I had the hearing loss. And then I went to bed one night. I woke up. Something had changed in my head or in my sinuses. Something clicked or something changed. And from that moment on, I went from sleeping 18 hours a day for a year to sleeping only 1 or 2 hours a night. 1 or 2 hours every 24 hours. And that went on for 4.5 years. When I started sleeping only 1 or 2 hours a night, years earlier, I started the process of weaning off of all the medications I was on. But I was still on, when that started, when I began sleeping only 1 or 2 hours a night, I was still on 2 sleep medications, clonazepam and Zopiclone. And they had me on 2.5 Zopiclone times 7.5 and 0.5 clonazepam. Okay, did I the first one, did I see Zopiclone or did I see? So let me start over. They had me on 2.5 Zopiclone, 2.5 times 7.5 plus 0.5 clonazepam times 3. They had plus multiple trazodone, and there were other drugs added on. There were times opioids were added on to that. And I was only sleeping 3 hours a night for years, and then when I started sleeping 1 or 2 hours a night, I was on the multiple clonazepam and multiple Zopiclone. So imagine all those drugs and you're sleeping only 1 or 2 hours a night. How is that even possible? What could happen in your head or brain or sinuses or anywhere in your head? What could happen in your head where you're sleeping 3 hours a night and then you go to 18 hours a night for a year, and then you start sleeping 1 or 2 hours every 24 hours? for 4.5 years. What can make that happen? What can make that happen? What could possibly go on in someone's head to make that happen? Or their body, or their brain, or their nervous system, or their sinus? What could trigger these things where you're fighting for your life? There was no emotional upset. This was 2017, 2018. There was no depression. There was no, crisis. There's no new medication started. I looked through my pharmacy records. Nothing strange. I've had people try to talk me into this, that, the other thing. The bottom line, what could make these things happen? When I woke up, I'd been sleeping 18 hours a day for a year. When I woke up, something had changed in my brain or in my sinuses. Something clicked or something changed. And from that moment on, I began sleeping only 1 or 2 hours every 24 hours, fighting for my life. From the minute that started, I was having suicidal ideation. When you're sleeping only 1 hour or 2 hours every 24 hours, you are in crisis inside your body, your nervous system, your brain, your mentally, emotionally, physically, you're in crisis. What could make that happen? And what I wanted to say is, what I started this video for, what I wanted to say is, during that time, starting in I don't know when it started, 2017 or 2018, my whole face and head was so painful that I just couldn't even go like this. I couldn't touch anywhere. My head was so inflamed, but I was so... People thought I had it so together. I looked perfectly okay, but in my mind, this is odd for me to say this, in my mind, I thought, and then, I realized I have severe sleep apnea, and then I got CPAP. In my mind, I thought that everybody with using CPAP, I think, felt that way, that their head was so painful they couldn't even touch it. Like I was so out of it. And like, in some ways I was so together. Like, I was really half out of my mind. I was more than half out of my mind. I was in pain. I was running on at times zero sleep. I was going to medical appointments on zero sleep. There were times, like, I was really out of it. I so desperately needed help. I so desperately needed a family, my family, to fight for my life. I fought and fought to get into the hospital to get CPAP. I literally was being tortured. I was fighting for my life and fighting for my mind. And I was so ill, I was stopping breathing awake. My diaphragm was stopping. My throat was closing awake. My oxygen was down to 70 awake. But that head inflammation went on for, I think, more than 4.5 years. It was never diagnosed. It was never discussed. Doctors weren't even really asking me what my symptoms were. There were so many things going wrong. But I wanted to make note of that inflammation, that excruciating pain on my face that was never, ever diagnosed or discussed with doctors.